On the Radio Wammo Breakfast, time for State of It. We do it with Selwyn Manning from livenews.co.nz and 36-parallel.com. Good morning to you, Selwyn.
Yeah, good morning, Glenn.
And today we're talking about something called the Papua New Guinea crisis. And I was saying a little bit earlier that you'd be forgiven for not knowing that there is indeed a crisis with Papua New Guinea and New Zealand and Australia's challenge with Papua New Guinea, not being covered in the mainstream media. What is this crisis?
Well, the crisis all began around about August, September last year when the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea back then, Sir Michael Somare, became ill, a health complaint, heart complaint. He was hospitalised over in Singapore. And while he was there, the people back in Papua New Guinea, particularly its capital, Port Moresby, the politicians started to think, well, maybe the old Grand Chief is on his way out. And so there was actually a bid for a new Prime Minister, and this man called Peter O'Neill rose from the Parliament and became the Prime Minister. If they calculated that it was the end of the Grand Chief, Sir Michael Somare, they calculated wrong. I mean, the guy, he recovered, and on his return to Papua New Guinea, he looked frail. But in the months after that, he re-established a zest, Glenn, for the Prime Ministership, and he has been one of building back loyalists amongst not just politicians, but for Papua New Guinea. It's created a real crisis in the sense that it's split the public service, it's split the judiciary, the judges, it's even split to a degree factions within the police and the army. What we saw was Papua New Guinea, its judges saying it was unconstitutional that Peter O'Neill sought and took the Prime Ministership. Other judges are saying no, it was completely fine. The split there where the Chief Justice was basically under investigation for making improper rulings, etc., etc. You had a mutiny in the army most recently as the end of January and February, where one faction in the army attempted to take Somare faction attempted to take power via the military, and you've seen pockets within the police. Most recently is only 2 weeks ago, where the dominant faction, that is apparently in favour of Peter O'Neill, beating the hell out of another faction of police officers who were supporting Somare. So that's basically the background to this crisis that's up there, Glenn.
Okay, so where does that leave democracy in Papua New Guinea?
Where it leaves democracy, well, that was the big question up until about 6 days ago. The Peter O'Neill, the one who says he's Prime Minister, he said, we're going to defer the scheduled elections, which were scheduled for June, July this year. And he says we were going to defer that out to a point where things have stabilised down. This is too much of a powder keg at the moment. The last thing anybody wanted was to see Papua New Guinea, a nation of 9 million people and absolutely massively rich natural resource with gold, oil, gas, etc., etc., descending into civil unrest or even civil war in the most extreme sense. Now, that was challenged constitutionally. The Australians came into the picture on that and tried to really demand to Peter O'Neill, listen, you are our favoured man, was the message that they were giving to Peter O'Neill, but you cannot delay an election. You must have it on time as scheduled in the middle of the year. That caused all those factions around Peter O'Neill to say, get off our patch, Australia, we're not tolerating this, we're an independent sovereign state and we're not going to be manipulated and told what to do by you people who have enjoyed too much dominance in the past. And that was the retaliatory kind of message there. Australia backed off a little bit, Glenn, at that stage, and this is all going on 2 weeks ago, and it backed off and said, okay, but just think through. You know, the place is unstable now. If you give it a date where people can go and exercise their vote, that vote will most likely settle this whole stoush, if you like, once and for all. And it took a softly approach. You had Bob Carr, the new appointed Foreign Minister of Australia, coming in on that. He's got a more abrasive kind of front-footing kind of approach. So they brought Julia Gillard in on this, and she had a telephone conversation on last Friday, basically, with Peter O'Neill, and just says, come on. And he came out, said, you know, basically within 2 days, he came out and he met with the warring factions, if you like. And I don't mean that in an armed way, but and said the election is going to be held as per the schedule in June, July. And for the last 5 days, apparently, from contacts up in Port Moresby, they're saying things have become a little bit more quiet. They've settled down. People are believing that the elections will take place in the end of June, beginning of July, and they're all focusing on that. So it's an interesting kind of situation and so delicate, and yet we didn't hear a whisper of this back in New Zealand, really, Glenn.
No, exactly. But in that case, why should New Zealand care? Why is Papua New Guinea so important?
It's important to the whole region because it's the most mineral-rich, oil-rich, gold-rich nation right across the Pacific Melanesian span. There are so many Australian investments that are up there, but also what that means is a lot of New Zealand interest as well attached to that. There's also this issue of stability through our region. It's our patch. We're there and we're involved with these things. Remember that for the last 9 years, we've had the regional assistance mission to the Solomon Islands, where New Zealand has been a significant major contributor to settling that country down, to bringing it back from civil war to a functioning state. Australia has led that, but New Zealand has been right in there. Diplomatically, we have a lot of interests up there in Papua New Guinea. It's the one that used to, until this kind of unsettled period materialised in the spring of last year, was the dominant Melanesian faction in the Pacific Island Forum. So all of the diplomacy that goes around there is vital in a sense. In New Zealand, should we care? Yes. If things went awry up in Papua New Guinea, that impacts, by degrees on not only our diplomatic efforts, but certainly our economy in a sense as well. It's very significant.
Okay. And what steps should New Zealand and Australia be taking, do you think?
Well, the trouble has been that not so much New Zealand, but Australia has put, even in the last 12 months, $480-odd million up into Papua New Guinea by way of aid. And that's small beer, if you like, compared to the amount of foreign private investment that has gone into Papua New Guinea. The mining firms, the exploration firms, the extraction firms, and all of this positioning around, of which New Zealand has interests in this area too, of unlocking the natural resource that has traditionally been out of reach, but the new technologies are getting there. So where New Zealand and Australia have been in this conundrum part, they have put by way of goodwill a lot of aid up there into Papua New Guinea. That there's all of this foreign investment that both countries have a lot of say in, a lot of leadership in too.
Yeah.
But they have not been able to press the envelope to the degree for fearing a political backlash that forces Papua New Guinea into some sort of isolationist political vacuum. And if it did that more, it would then attach more to Fiji. Okay. And you would see fracture and more polarisation in Pacific affairs. And we all know very well, don't we, about how isolationist kind of policies under the military regime have created an imbalance across the Pacific. And we hear a lot of that about that, with the military leader Frank Bainimarama, while he the last thing that Australia and New Zealand wanted was for Papua New Guinea, which is naturally close via the Melanesian bloc to Fiji, but attaching to the expense of that relationship between Australia, New Zealand and Papua New Guinea, it would be a nightmare. So that softly approach, I guess, in answer to your question, is where they have to really go.
Indeed. All right. Well, a full analysis of this is up at 36-parallel.com. Just click on the link there on the front page, and you'll also find this as a video there once more, also up at livenews.co.nz. That has been State of It for this week. Thank you very much, Salman.
Okay, Glenn. Take care.
Track here from